Welcome to Creative Conversations with Roger Humphrey, the fine arts podcast where I get to talk with composers, performers, authors, visual artists, filmmakers, and others in the arts. Before we begin, please hit the like, follow, or subscribe buttons. It's a very easy thing to do, and it goes a long way towards supporting the channel, and it really does help a lot. Hey, if you or someone you love plays guitar or ukulele, please consider visiting my website at www.rogerhumphrey.com and looking at the many things I have to offer. Much of it's for free. If you like what you see, please take a moment to subscribe. I promise, I won't send you any spam, just occasional updates. And I want welcome Geoff Deibel. Geoffrey Deibel is widely described as a leading voice in saxophone and contemporary music, with a career that includes performance, teaching, and recording. And I'm just so happy that he decided to come on the show. Hi, Geoff.
Hey, Roger. How are you doing?
I am absolutely terrific. Thanks for asking. And so, in the interest of transparency, we should let people know that you and I go back a minute or two. We've known each other for, God, how many years now? 20 maybe?
Oh, at least, yeah. I mean, I finished my degree at MSU in 2010, so yeah, it's it's probably been about 20 years.
Yeah, close to 20
I
years.
would have started about 4 years before that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know what they say, time's fun when you're having flies or something.
That's
like
right.
that. And at that particular time, you were in a group. You were in a quartet called the H2 Quartet, and I believe you're still in them. You guys are still together after all this time. An award-winning group. You've won the Fish Off way back then, and other awards since.
Yep.
You've recorded 7 albums.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
About to record our 8th. Yep.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. It was really it was kind of an interesting thing for us at that time because we were still students when we recorded our first album, which was kind of rare back then. It's still kind of rare. I think students are doing more things like that at younger ages now, but I think it's still something was a bit rare, for our age and experience. So.
And you focus on, for those who don't know, you focus on contemporary music.
Mm-hmm.
And so are you commissioning new works as well?
Yeah, I've done a lot of commissioning myself, just as a soloist, and then of course as a member of the various chamber music groups that I'm a part of. H2 is one of them. I have a couple of other groups that I've started a little bit more recently. I got a large grant from my university, Florida State, a couple of years ago to do a couple more commissioned works for H2 and then for these 2 other groups. And one of them is piano, percussion, saxophone. And then the third is saxophone, violin, and voice. And both of those groups kind of came out of my relationship with a contemporary music festival that I teach at in the summer times called the Cortona Sessions for New Music. And these were basically all colleagues of mine from the Cortona Sessions. So my one-time percussion colleague, pianist colleagues, and then voice and violin. And we all, we play there in the summer times. And, we were like, why should we just do this once a year? We should be doing it more than just once a year. And so, I was lucky enough to get this grant, and we commissioned in the percussion piano saxophone group, which is called Trio Nebbia. We commissioned a piece by Pulitzer Prize winning and Guggen. What has he won? He's won kind of everything. He's been a MacArthur Genius Grant winner. His name is Taishan Sori. His saxophone concerto won the Pulitzer Prize last year.
Wow.
And so, we got a percussion piano saxophone piece from him that we just read for the first time in Chicago a couple weeks ago. So that'll be on our upcoming season of concerts. And a couple other pieces for those other groups that are kind of either been commissioned and performed or are in the works.
So I noticed, just kind of looking through your website, which, by the way, there will be a link to that when this goes out. You've recorded something like 17 albums with all of these different groups. Did I count those right?
Some of them are kind of one-off releases, and some are things that I've done as a member of other ensembles. So there's one album that I'm on by a group called the Wet Ink Ensemble. That's one of the big contemporary music ensembles in New York. So I did a little project with them a couple of years ago, and then yeah, there's just I think kind of the model nowadays is moving not completely, but in part away from full album releases,
Ah,
and people are doing because video is such a big thing now, and has been for a while that people are doing just sort of like one-off video releases that will be released on YouTube or something like that. So some of those are just kind of one-off releases. Yeah,
yeah, I still think you're an overachiever, but that's just me.
I appreciate it. I do my best. Try to stay out of trouble.
So I've got to ask the questions. The first question is when we think of saxophone as an instrument, we tend to think of pop music. And we don't often think of it. And it started off as a classical instrument. I mean,
Hmm.
Berlioz used it quite a bit. But
Right.
how did you happen to come over to the dark side?
In terms of being classical musician.
Yes. Hmm.
Ah, well, I listened to I don't know if I could say I listened to more classical music when I was a young person. My parents were both, um, both musicians. My mother, more of a sort of professional musician. She still is the director of her church music program. Um, and so they had a bunch of records, that I listened to. I don't remember spending a lot of time listening to classical music, but I think it was really just because my first serious teacher was a classical musician, and he was, saxophonist. And if people listen to NPR, you might hear the NPR jingle being played by a saxophone quartet. And that is his saxophone quartet. He's the soprano player in that group, the
Cool.
Washington Saxophone Quartet. So I think it was just, the fact that I had him as a teacher. He was teaching this type of playing and this kind of music, and also the fact that saxophone as a classical instrument owes a lot of its existence just to the fact that we are a part of the band's phenomenon, the band's programs
Right.
that became so important in the early part of the 20th century. And so, jazz kind of took over in certain terms of like the popular,
Right.
um, way that the instrument was perceived. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It started off life as kind of a classical instrument. So
So, and then working in classical is one thing. I think the safe bet would be to stay with the traditional stuff and maybe arrange, some Mozart or some Haydn or something.
yeah.
And you're playing contemporary. I almost think of that as two separate categories, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to think of it, actually. And I had a good friend and mentor whose name is Marcus Weiss. He's a teacher and player in Switzerland, and has taught at a lot of important, contemporary music festivals like the Darmstadt Festival and so on. And he, I think, kind of put this idea in my head where he says that the classical saxophone doesn't really exist because we don't really have that repertoire. We are either you could say unburdened by it, or or we lack that repertoire. And so he sees it, and I agree with him that it's an opportunity to kind of chart our own path in contemporary music. But this is something that people in my business have struggled with and continue to struggle with, which is what kind of music should we be playing? Should we be doing arrangements of old pieces, which is what a lot of the very first musicians did because there was no repertoire. So
Sure.
do we engage in that sort of act of trying to build this interest in the instrument, or do we try something different or something in between? And I have kind of dedicated most of my career to doing more contemporary music, but I'm a fan of all different kinds of music. I love old music.
Sure.
I love all kinds of classical music and jazz music and pop music and everything, that we don't have enough time to talk about. Um, but it's a philosophical question, I think, that really is an interesting one to explore because we are at this point, we have gained some notoriety. We've won lots and lots of chamber music competitions. You mentioned Fishoff, and it's almost a joke nowadays among students that I teach and and sort of people that are into this world of chamber music competitions. It's sort of a joke that we just expect the saxophone quartet is going to win these competitions every year because it's one of the few metrics that we have of achieving success and notoriety is through these competitions, because we're not members of the classical orchestra most of the
Right.
time. It's we don't see us playing concertos most of the time in front of orchestras and that sort of thing. So chamber music really kind of has been the medium that we found the most success in. So yeah, it's an
It's
interesting
kind of
phenomenon.
parallel to my guitar,
Hmm.
because we had classical guitarists during the classic and romantic eras, but the to be very honest with you, the composers were okay,
Yep, I can relate.
but they weren't. We didn't have too many great pieces, and so as we come into the 20th century, Segovia being the kind of the forefront of all of that, and his taste ran towards the romantic, and so there were a lot of pieces that possibly could have been written. I mean, Stravinsky asked him one time, why haven't you never asked me to write something for you? And he says, because I wouldn't want to insult you by not playing it. And, but his tastes were, firmly rooted in romantic and impressionistic time. And
Mm.
so a lot of the music, a lot of our repertoire for the first and middle parts of the 20th century was, it was either Spanish repertoire that had been written by Spanish people. So people
Hmm.
tend to refer to it as a Spanish guitar rather than,
Mm.
but a lot of it's transcribed, a lot of
Hmm.
transcriptions.
Hmm.
I played Bach on the guitar and have for years, and Bach never
Hmm.
wrote for the guitar, never wrote a note.
Sure. Right.
So now we're getting a lot of stuff that's being written, and the guitars being included certain um, in certain new pieces. Gosh, I'm trying to remember who I had on the show as a composer, and I'm pulling an old timers thing here, but he wrote a piece for string quartet and classical guitar. And Elliot Fisk, the great guitarist, set in
Oh yeah.
with a cassette quartet, and they recorded it. And I was listening to some of it before the interview, and the thing that really impressed me was it wasn't a quartet plus a guitar. It was five musicians, five, right, and so it was really a quintet, and the guitar was just simply a part of that. And that's kind of a new thing for guitar too. So I totally
Mm.
understand what you're talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and when you're even getting into chamber music, when you're talking about contemporary music and contemporary chamber music, a lot of that's difficult for a lot of people to listen to.
Hmm.
It's almost like a dangerous choice to make from a
Yeah.
career standpoint, And the fact that you guys are
Absolutely.
making it work, I think, is impressive. Are you having a hard time getting audiences?
Well, I mean, H2 has sort of slowed down a little bit at this point. We are all kind of, you know, finding ourselves busy with our careers, teaching or in administration. We have, two of our members are now administrators within their universities. Director of the school of music or a director of an area or something like that. And then Kim, who's our baritone saxophone player, went actually came to FSU where I teach now and got her doctorate in theory, and is teaching theory. And so I'm the only saxophone professor left in the group, which is interesting. But they also have families with kids and everything, and so we found ourselves with a little less time to do concertizing and that sort of thing. So we're coming up on our 20-year mark here, and so I think we're looking at trying to do some more significant touring. We do have a big commissioning project that's about to be announced that I'm really excited about. But things have slowed down a little bit for us. I think when we do play, it tends to be sometimes at conferences, so there's kind of built-in audiences. But what we do is eclectic. I mean, there's not. It's changing a little bit, but for a long time, groups like mine would win these competitions, or sometimes not win these competitions because the competitions didn't think they were marketable. Um, and that sometimes happens, and that's changing a little bit now, where you've got, I know Fish Off, we just missed the mark on this, but Fish Off now, when they have a group that wins, they send them out on tours like around the
Oh,
country, and they if you win the Concert Artists Guild, same thing, they'll hook you up with, presenting organizations and that sort of thing. So that is changing. The attitudes around that are changing. I think audiences are, you know, maybe a bit more interested in having something other than a string quartet, or someone that's going to sing art songs, or a violinist or something like that. There's a little bit more appetite for it. But I think, that's indicative of just how classical music is changing in general too. I think people are interested in more than just what the museum culture has to offer. That
yeah.
seems to be the issue right now with classical music at large. So
So yeah, did you know Ken Beechler at the Wharton Center?
that name definitely sounds familiar,
Well,
but it's been long enough
he
that I've
managed
forgotten.
the Wharton Center at the time that you were there, and
Yeah.
was
Okay.
doing most of the booking, and it was really I saw him socially
Hmm.
at one point. And I'd be lying if I said we were friends, but he knew who I was,
Hmm.
and I was talking to him about being classical guitarist, and he liked classical guitar, but he would get these promo packages from guitarists all the time, and they were like 5 minutes out of university, and their only performance was university stuff,
Right.
and he says, and I said, well, there's no way I could put 2,500 butts in seats at the Wharton Center. I think that's what the seating is.
Right.
And I also told him that I was working with a flutist, and so guitar and flute. And he goes, "That's nice." And then at that time, I was playing with a couple of other people, and I was playing guitar, flute, and clarinet trios.
Hmm.
And he immediately set up, because the unusual combination. It just is like, really, what does that sound like? And I mean, and he was everything else was like boring, old stuff, but that was just unique enough. And I think with the idea of a saxophone quartet in
Hmm.
your world is not that unusual. But I think
Right.
in the world at large, I think it's kind of a surprising sound, you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah. Absolutely.
and people get interested. What is it? So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so how did you decide to work with the contemporary stuff? Like I said, that's kind of as opposed to going down the maybe the safer path. Um,
Yeah, I should say, like, I've been thinking about, well, while I've been talking about this, I should say that, this is just the way that I've decided to go,
uh-huh.
and it's really just out of interest. But I think it matters less. Um, I think it matters less what style of music that you decide to play, and more what kind of musical statement you're going to make with the repertoire that you choose to play. And you see a lot of players that do a great job, I think, of combining new music and old music in really effective ways,
Uh-huh.
and helping people to connect those dots, between repertoire they would never think has any connection, but in
Right.
fact it does have a connection. So, but yeah, in terms of how I came to it, honestly, I think it took a while. As a saxophonist, you must play new music, because that's the music that exists. Um, and even our sort of core repertoire, if that sort of thing exists, is it's it's all 20th century stuff. Like, we have very few pieces that are before the 20th century, and so you end up playing these staple pieces that, to our ears, we've heard them a million times, and so they don't seem that out there to us. But they're like you said, they're sometimes by second rate or third rate occasionally composers. And so I often tell my students, like, you really have to spend some time thinking about what is in this piece that you can bring out that is going to be obvious to the audience. Like, what's the thematic content of the piece? And I realized at some point, during my schooling, and then it was reinforced over and over again in my teaching, how many pieces I had played, performed, in lessons and in recitals, that I'd never really gone through that process myself. I'd played them probably pretty well, but I never really thought about, okay, like, what is the thematic content of this piece? And I used to be very anti sort of theory. I was much more interested in the musicological origins of the piece, or something historical about the piece. And I've really done a 180 on that. I talk a lot about the music theory, the parameters of the piece, like what can we pull out of this piece that is going to be something recognizable to our audience, so that they have something to reach out to and to grab onto, right? Um, but I think, yeah, I got interested in new music because I for a couple of reasons. I was really into a lot of different kinds of underground music when I was a young person. Like, I was going to like punk rock shows and listening to a lot of like really heavy music, and later on got into like underground hip hop and like really very esoteric type of stuff. And I was always interested in that thing, that secret thing that no one knows about, but it has this amazing, thing to offer you if you're
Right.
willing to engage with it. So I think it was partly that, and then partly the fact that as a saxophonist you absolutely have to play new music. And so therefore, as a student, I encountered a lot of very avant-garde pieces, abstract music, that at the time I was just like, okay, that's weird but interesting. And it took me a really long time when I remember sort of making the decision, but it was just before I came to MSU to do my doctorate, made the decision that I really wanted to dedicate myself to this music, because it was just so different and so interesting, and every new piece that I would hear would be a completely new sound world. And it was just a something that was intriguing to me. I like stuff that I don't understand because I want to figure it out. Um, and I will also say that there's a lot of contemporary music that doesn't have anything really relevant to say, or is not that interesting. And it took me a while to start to know the difference between the pieces that actually have something that speaks to our humanity, or our situation as human beings, and has something to offer, and that is maybe just for show, or it's just the composer showing off their skill or something like that. So that took a really long time to figure out for me.
I One of the things about with new music in general, and I've had several contemporary composers and performers on over the last couple of years, and there are times, and I'm as I listen to any instrument, I suppose, there are times when you really believe that they're utilizing that instrument to explore the sounds and explore the music. But there are other times when it feels like they're just using the music as an excuse to explore the instrument. Like what,
Right.
right? And I'm not necessarily judging and saying that's a bad thing.
Hmm.
I guess my question is, am I right or wrong here? I don't know if I'm perceiving that properly.
Yeah, I think the good stuff for me is stuff. I think both can be interesting. By the way, to answer your
Yeah.
question, I think
Uh huh.
both can be really interesting. But I think the stuff that is really stands the test of time and is noteworthy and is worthy of attention is the stuff that is not only interesting because it might explore the boundaries of the instrument. Like the saxophonists are kind of obsessed with that, because we feel the need to show off, because we have this, lack of a home when it comes
Right.
to classical music. So I think we're a little guilty sometimes of doing too much of that kind of music that's a little bit too virtuosic just for virtuosity's sake. And so it's music that is not only about that. It's not only self-referential, or just self-obsessed or whatever. When you have stuff that is something more about more than just itself, then I think that's the stuff that's really interesting, or has something to say about the natural world, or something political or something like that. That's the stuff that I find really compelling.
Um, as I mean, I've never done as many concerts as you have, and I won't pretend to, but or pretend to say that I have. But when I have done concerts, one of the things that I've noticed over and over and over again was how my sound changed from physical location to physical location, from hall to hall, and
Mm.
then also when I did my recordings, I know that the I use the same guy and have for years, and I mean, I haven't done a new recording since 2012, but we spent a couple of months looking in the studio as a small little project studio, and we spent a couple of months looking for the right place to put the chair, the right microphone placement. I mean, we spent a long time just working on getting the sound right.
Mm-hmm.
And so is that something that I mean, if you're exploring sounds on your instrument, do you have to take all that kind of stuff into consideration?
You know, I should. And I think that, on some level you have to trust, the sound engineer to do their
Yeah,
job, and
sure,
and some of that has to do with they want to know what you're looking for too. So,
sure.
I've tended to work with a lot of the same people. More recently, I've branched out a little bit and worked with a few people that are not my same old people, and have had some really good results. Um, and I think the ones that I've worked with that I think have done a good job have, asked me, what are the send me some recordings that you really like and tell me why you like them or whatever, so
Uh-huh.
that's always helpful, because I'll send a couple things. I'll be like, I like this because of, how close you feel to the instrument, or, just the resonance that I hear, whatever it happens to be. But yeah, it's something that we all should pay attention to. And I think maybe in the past, when I was younger, I was sort of content to trust the sound engineer completely with that.
Uh-huh.
Maybe I should have, taken a little more care to direct things a little bit more. But I've generally had some pretty good results with it. So yeah.
When I first started recording, I trusted the engineers completely because honestly, I didn't know my ass from my elbow, and
Right.
I was just trying real hard not to look stupid.
Hmm. Well, you've
Yeah,
got your own job to do, right? You're trying
yeah,
to, give a good reading of the music and everything. So
right, exactly,
yeah.
exactly. So and I trusted pretty much the engineers all the way through the process, including him. Other than we spent time, and I say we, it was he and I as a partnership because he demanded it. And
Hmm.
rather than him just taking control, he just says, "Okay, how do you like this? Let's do that." Blah blah. It was like going to see your eye doctor. A
Right.
or B, A or
Yeah.
B,
Yeah. Yeah.
and narrowing things down that way a little bit. But
Yeah.
since particularly since the pandemic, I do a lot of recording for my students, and suddenly I got to push my own buttons,
Hmm.
and I don't like it.
It's tough. It's tough. I mean, they are professional. Those guys are professionals for a reason. I mean, I think the most important thing for me when I go into a situation like that, is that I've seen the person's work beforehand, so I know I can trust them. And I really just want to make sure that they can make me sound like me. I don't want them to, do something that's not going to be representative of what I sound like, in a live setting. So,
So fortunately, you don't have to worry about, and I think that's a great way to do it. So you're not worried about choosing repertoire based on how it's going to sound in the studio versus how it's going to sound on the concert stage.
right.
So,
Yeah. And I think one of the best experiences I've had recently, it was actually maybe feels like it was just yesterday, but I think it was maybe 4 years ago. I did a recording with this percussionist of this piece by Greek French composer named Yannis Xenakis, and it's just soprano saxophone and percussion. And that was the first, I believe, the first video recording that I've done. And I tell people when they ask about it, because it has gotten a little bit of attention, I say it was the best. I want to record everything like that now, because you're recording video, you can't take as many takes. You can't just punch in a note or two. It
right.
doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. So the recording process was actually much faster and much more streamlined, and and I think it has this sort of continuity and immediacy to the recording that maybe some of the other things that I've done lack a little bit. But it was very refreshing because it was just like there's nowhere to hide, so you might as well just lay it down and get it done. And I loved it. I want to do everything like that now because it was a lot less stressful. The editing process also took a lot less time because there's just not as many options. So I loved it, and it turned out it's probably one of my most favorite things I've ever done in terms of recording projects. So
Wow.
yeah,
Cool. Cool.
yeah.
So are Are you performing a lot? You have a
Yeah. I mean, most of my time is taken up by teaching, to be perfectly honest.
Sure. Well, how big a
And
studio do you have?
it's pretty big. I have usually I'm averaging around 25 students in my studio,
Wow.
which is, if I was teaching privately, it wouldn't be that much. But, teaching at a university, that's 25 hours. I mean, I don't quite teach 25 hours a week. It'll be a little bit below that. But then I'm also, coaching some saxophone quartets. Um, I'm, holding studio class, graduate studio class, once a week. And that's before I get to any email or my own practicing or anything else that I
Right.
might have to do around the house or something like that. So yeah, I definitely feel the pressure, especially in the spring when I'm in audition season and trying to recruit students and everyone's giving the recitals. So you have to go back to the school at night to your students' recital, which I love. I'm always really, it's a joyful time when that's all happening, but it's also very busy. Um, so yeah, I play. I would like to be playing more always, but I do I do the most I can, and it's with the time that I have.
Do you
So
do you travel? You travel quite a bit.
yeah, I think actually friends around town here will ask, where are you playing next? When are you playing next? And oftentimes I'll be like, yeah, I'm playing in a week or I'm playing in a couple weeks, but it'll be somewhere else. It'll be in Chicago or somewhere else. And so I have things that I'll do with the symphony here occasionally, and I play in a pop band actually with one of my colleagues and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's lots of different things, aside from all the crazy contemporary stuff that I'm doing. Try to keep a nice variety, right? That's the spice of life. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I think so. I've played a lot of classical, but God, I played a lot of weddings, and
Hmm.
and people are always asking for some sort of a pop tune. So I was doing all of these arrangements
Hmm.
of different pop songs, and that'll stretch your chops a little bit,
Oh
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
trying because one man band. It's just me and my little six strings on a wooden box, and that's it,
That's
baby.
right. That's right. Yeah, it's
So
a whole different thing, that stuff.
so okay. Well, Jeff, believe it or not, we're all out of time, and I am
Okay.
so grateful for you to take the time to do this. I appreciate you so much,
Hey, my pleasure.
and see if I can figure out how we say goodbye. I don't know anymore. Jeff, thanks. I'll talk to you soon, I hope.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks again. Bye bye. I'd like to thank Geoffrey Deibel for taking the time to come on the show. If you'd like to know more about him or listen to him play, you could find a link to his website in the descriptions below. I'd like to thank you too for taking the time to listen. If you enjoy these podcasts, please share your favorite episodes with your friends and introduce them to Creative Conversations with Roger Humphrey.